Good afternoon, and we want to welcome you here this afternoon to the Columbia Metropolitan Convention Center. I'm Carl Blackstone, President and CEO of the Columbia Chamber, and on behalf of the Building Industry Association and the Central Carolina Association of Realtors, we appreciate y'all being here today for, I think it's our 4th annual Midlands Real Estate Forecast. And so we've got some great speakers here today that are going to give us some fascinating numbers, I'm sure. But want to do a little bit of housekeeping real quick before we begin. One, I also want to welcome folks that are joining us online. Those that couldn't be here today in person, we are trying to keep it spaced out a little bit, make sure that we're following protocols. So if you don't mind keeping your mask on for those that are here, that is the new city requirement. But for those at home that don't have to wear a mask, thanks for joining us. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Dominion Energy, D.R. Horton, Eastwood Homes, Great Southern Homes, Guild Mortgage, McDonald & Associates, and Mortgage Options. Without our sponsors, we couldn't be here. So thank you. If you'll give them a round of applause, I appreciate it. I tell you what, we're fortunate to live in a great community like Columbia, and we've got a lot of positives. We're also our worst critics at times. I know I am about things that I wish we could do better. But it's important to know where we stand as a community and what our strengths and weaknesses are. And so that's part of what today is about, is showing our good strengths and things that we have opportunity to work on. And there's plenty of those, but for the most part, we are definitely in a great place to live, work, and play, which is the Midlands of South Carolina. So thank y'all for joining us today. Hope you learn a lot. And it's my honor and privilege to bring up Alan Hutto, the new CEO of the Building Industry Association of Central South Carolina. Alan?
Thank you, Carl. Again, I'm Alan Hutto. I'm new. I've been here about 3 months with the BIA, and it's my pleasure to be here. And thank you to the Chamber and the Central Carolina Realtors for working with us to put this on. And thank you to the members of the BIA Sales and Marketing Council who are here with us today and watching online. Y'all are an awesome, energetic group, and really appreciate y'all. Small plug, BIA Tour of Homes starts this weekend, so I would encourage y'all to go to that, and we've got some flyers out front that'll tell you a little bit more about it. So let me introduce John Hunt. John 30 years of experience in doing this, and he emphasizes qualitative and quantitative analysis, which has led to very accurate modeling and forecasting. John is part of the team that predicted the 2007 recession in 2005. He also predicted the dramatic loss of first-time buyers after 2013 and tied it to the disappearance of distressed building lots. In June 2019, he was the first in the nation to call the bottom of the 2018-19 housing collapse, tying it to the rise and fall of interest rates. So John has a pretty good track record. So come up here and tell us what we're looking at. I hope it's good news.
I get my slide presentation up.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Turn your phones off, please. Thank you. If I usually charge $1,000 for every phone that goes off, that goes into my vacation fund. So I'm watching you. So Midlands real estate forecast. Actually, we're going to do kind of the nation, kind of southeast, and we're in 35 cities. We just ended up in Dallas, Texas, and Houston. We just opened up there, and I appreciate you being here. Although I wonder why. Because did you not know that the housing boom is over? You should all be home prepping for the apocalypse. Why aren't you there? The news media is all over this. It started in May. Bad news, bad news, bad news. Home sales plunging. And then you get to housing market falls back to earth. Home builder rally turns to rout and fading housing boom. Again, housing boom is officially over. I'm sure you've read these. And then this is the one that caused my phone to ring off the hook, mostly from nervous bankers. This was this big CNBC article and TV piece at the end of July with the headline, and I can't, housing boom is over as new home sales fall to pandemic low. Now, always remember that the national media is usually a month to a month and a half behind in their data. So what they were talking about at the end of July was probably happening in May or June. Also, and I know you find this very hard to believe, sometimes they misinterpret the data. So we switched to weekly reporting when this happened. See how this worked out perfectly? I just got to the pandemic. So we got to the pandemic. We went to weekly reporting. We normally do monthly, but out of fear and self-preservation, we went to weekly reporting because we thought we were all going to go to hell in a handbasket. Excuse my language. And we thought if we're going to go down, we might as well go down with a fight. So let's do weekly reporting to try to keep our customers on the front edge of things. Now, I have to tell you that I was actually wrong once, only once, and it was April of last year. What you're looking at on the right axis is, this is for Atlanta, but every city looked the same. And I'll show you Columbia in a second. But you're looking at new and resale pending sales in the blue and the green line, and that's on the right. You got to stay above zero. That's that thick black line. Above zero is good, below zero is bad compared to last year. And then the COVID cases are on the left, and those are those little bitty gray bars, and you'll see why they're little bitty in just a minute. My hypothesis when this happened was that we were doomed. I thought that the more COVID cases we had, the worse it would be for housing. Silly me. Did anybody else think that? Yeah, everybody. So this is the reason you do weekly data, because you can't see it in a monthly update. So I sent out this newsletter to all of our customers. We went to actually doing weekly newsletters from March to October of last year. Everybody got sick of hearing from me, but I was doom and gloom. We're going to be down 50 to 55%. Look at the slope of that line. And we only had a few COVID cases. It was true at the beginning, but then the next week happened. So the next week happened, and we had another record in COVID cases, and we saw not a continuation of the downturn, but a stopping. Again, this is weekly data. You don't get that anywhere. So 1 week doesn't make a trend. So we waited to another week, and we got another sign that I was absolutely wrong, because we had another high in COVID cases, and the housing was starting to show that very classic V recovery, which nobody predicted. I didn't, but that's why we did it weekly. So what happened next is we completely eradicated any thought that there was any connection between the number of COVID cases and the demand for housing. Why do I say that? Because we all went out and partied. By the way, we were the first to call a bottom in April 21st of last year. We all went out and partied on Memorial Day and the 4th of July, and you'll see those COVID cases spike in the second wave. And housing did the opposite of what it should have done, because we live in an opposite world. Housing demand exploded, caught us all off guard. Do you remember this? We stopped with the government shutdown for 6 to 8 weeks, and then the government opened back up, and holy moly, Katie bar the door. I mean, we're up huge, new and resale, double-digit growth over 19, which was also up double digits. This is back-to-back double-digit increases in a year that we had a pandemic, a once every 100-year pandemic. Why? I don't know. We're still trying to figure that out. We did see some moderation in the housing trends leading up to the election, the first week in November. And then what we found out is not only did the number of COVID cases have no effect on housing demand, neither did who won the election. Because as soon as the election was over, housing exploded again, in spite of the third and most horrific wave of COVID cases. And that's why my top scale is 65,000, because that's what we hit. Now I'm stopping real quick, because we're going to be comparing March, April, May of this year to March, April, and May of last year, which was horrible and weird and not normal, because when we should have had a spring market, we had a government shutdown and the data looked horrible. So you really can't get a fair analysis if you could compare to last year only. So going forward, I'm going to compare to last year and 2019, which is a more normal year. That's what a lot of economists will do. So the solid line going forward compares to last year. It's going to look great because we're compensating for the horrific negative that we had during the government shutdown. The hollow lines are comparing new and resale pending sales increases to 2019. You can see that we've moderated. We're not seeing 30, 40, 50% growth rates over 19 like we did here in 20, but we're still positive. We're still above the black line, but we're moderating. That was expected. You can't be up 60% every time forever. Now, again, I thought I'd seen it all. The next thing that surprised me as we moved to the end of April, as we were watching the data weekly, is new homes across the country in our 35 cities crashed. Not resale. New homes went negative in terms of pendings, stayed negative. Resale did moderate in May. And this is what you're seeing the articles about today. All those articles about doom and gloom and the housing boom being over was written off of data that was out in May of last year, in May of this year in June. Okay, they don't have the data I'm about to show you. Nobody does. So this is where the articles came from. First of all, they misinterpreted why new was down, but resale is critical. Why is resale critical in the analysis of housing demand? Is it the biggest part or the smallest part of housing demand? It's 80% of housing demand. It's the barometer. New homes is not a barometer of anything. It's only 20%, and we're so tied to constraints with labor issues, pricing issues, lumber prices, shortage of materials, appliances. You really can't look at new as a barometer. You do need to watch resale because it's going to tell you what's going on in demand. So watch what happens from May to resale. Whether you compare it against last year or the year before, resale begins to look extremely good, especially against 2019, which was a very good year. Wow, are you seeing that? So if this was a demand problem and the housing boom was over, resale would be down too. They're not. It wasn't the price increases and people getting sick of bidding wars that caused the decline in May at all. We're going to see that in a minute. First of all, let's talk about what happened with new construction. That's critical. That's where our jobs come from. And it's abnormal and nobody gets it. We did a poll of our builders in a meeting we had in Atlanta, 800 of us on the call, and we asked them these questions. We knew this was happening. The National Association of Home Builders kind of guessed it was 45% of their builders were throttling back on purpose. I wanted to take a poll. The answers to these questions I think are stunning. Are supply chain difficulties affecting your ability to sell homes? 73% said yes. Number two is critical. Have you taken measures such as limiting or eliminating pre-sales completely or delaying releasing homes only until after a framing stage? Now, why would a builder do those things? Anybody? In the hottest market in the world, why would a builder do that? You don't know. You can sign a contract today. In 6 months, you don't know what it's going to cost you. It's going to take you 6 months to build it. And I'm not in business to lose money. Do you believe that? Yeah. The news media doesn't get this, that we as an industry, not just in Atlanta or in Columbia, across the country, pull back on purpose. 70%, not 45%, 70% of builders did this. I think the number's higher than that. And then 58% said because of unpredictable nature of current supply pricing. But these same builders in the same group of questions were very positive because they knew this was not a question of demand. It was a question of supply, and I don't want to lose money, so they throttle back. So if you ask them what their forecast is for the industry, if you combine 1 and 2, that's 96% said just as good or better than last year, and last year was incredible. And you ask about their own business, 92% said just as good as last year or better. This is not a sign that we're in trouble. So let's go back to this. And we're going to do the same thing for Columbia in just a second. This is blown up for just this year. So that's what happened in new. This negative, now new seems to have bottomed and come out. Why? Don't think, by the way, you multiply this negative for new construction across the country, every market pulled back. Do you think that's part of the reason that we saw lumber futures come down? Yes, it's absolutely the reason lumber futures crashed. That's a massive pullback, and lumber futures corrected. We got the desired result. I'm hearing people now say, we're not feeling it all at the job site yet, those lumber futures, but I'm more confident signing a pre-sale contract. By the way, pre-sale is anywhere from 20 to 40% of all business in most cities. When you don't do pre-sales, that's a whole chunk of business that you're saying no to, and that's why the data is saying negative. But you can see that we're trending back up. What I'm hearing is I'm starting to get back into doing pre-sales. I'm more confident that I'll be able to make money in 6 months, and I'm releasing homes earlier in the stage of production, just starting that. But now let's look at resale. Why did resale bottom in May, and compared to last year and the year before, and even against last year, resale data in every market is up over last year, which was a great year. Was it pricing? No. There was an inflection point across the whole country that happened in May and had nothing to do with price. What did it have to do with? I'll tell you, inventory. Everywhere across the country, we burned off massive inventory. And in May, we found a bottom, and June, July, and August have been up. You got to have something to sell, folks. This is not a pricing issue. If it was a pricing issue, we'd still be down because prices are still way up. We're going to talk about that in a minute. This is a supply problem. By the way, look at this. The millennials and others had kicked in before the pandemic. We were declining. We were sucking off inventory at a very fast pace. A little bit of a pause and then a collapse, and now we've all gone positive. So in Atlanta, we're up 37%. So let's look at Columbia. Columbia is the same thing. Columbia has seen a bottom in resale in May, and you're out. New is actually leading the way. We're in Atlanta, new is negative still. In Columbia, new is positive because we've started to get back to doing pre-sales and also sell homes at a quicker pace. But that's what happened. So did the inventory also bottom? The inventory in Columbia bottomed actually in April. I don't have all the way back to 2019 yet. We're working on that. We're doing that for every city. But the inventory bottomed in April, and this is total inventory, by the way, not just new. This is new and resale combined. Your inventory bottomed in April, and then it's been up steadily since. But look at the months of supply. The top of my scale is 3. Everybody in this room should know the answer to this question. What is a normal months of supply? 6. We haven't been 6 in years. As a matter of fact, Columbia, based on demand and supply, has been almost at half a month. And you've seen a little bit of an increase to just below 1 month of supply. 1 month of supply is when crazy things happen, like bidding wars, people buying homes sight unseen, foregoing appraisal contingencies. That's what's going on right now. We need to get back to 6. It's impossible. I'll tell you why. But you've seen a huge increase in inventory just based on the bottom. But remember, we were so much higher in years before. We're at a low point here. You're 60% up since May. Now, this is not new construction. This is all resale. How do you get an increase in resale inventory? Honey, I know we got nowhere to move because nobody's building what we want. But did you see what our neighbors sold their house for in a bidding war? Oh my God, let's just sell and rent for a while. That's what happened. The high prices encouraged people to list their homes. That encouraged an increase in inventory. Was it enough? Your inventory in Columbia was up 60% from April and August. How did that affect your deficit in housing? Not a whole heck of a lot. So this chart is, I missed it. We'll talk about that later. Your deficit didn't move at all. That's how fast demand is increasing. But just to show you this happened in every city, Greenville, new crash starting in May, resale as well. Charleston, new construction crashed in May. What about Price? So do Atlanta, and we're going to do you guys as well. This is everywhere. You've read it. Is there a bubble? Is there a bubble? Is there a bubble? There's new construction change in price. It's not new I'm most concerned about is the resale prices. Resale prices have outpaced new prices over the same period by like 3 to 1. New in the last 12 months in Atlanta is up 4%. 4.5% is considered normal. Resale's up 15%. That's too high. That's 5 times too high. If you look at Columbia, you're going to get the same story. New is up, but only at 4%. Your resale's up 18. So 18 is what's concerning me. And if you look at this data over the last 18 months, it looks like a bubble. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. But let me give you my opinion, and I've recently, as of yesterday, had some folks nationally that are backing this up, why this is not a bubble. And we're right where we should be. So I'm old enough to know that 2002 was the last normal year for housing in this country. Right out of college, 1990, I got in the industry. We were pretty normal for a decade. Even 9/11 barely dented housing. Anybody here during that time, horrible time in the country? We just kept building. Do you remember that? We didn't know it was because of subprime, but we kept building. So at that time, we were appreciating at 4.5% annual appreciation rate. For a decade, that was normal for housing. Stays a little ahead of inflation. Our gap between new and resale prices was about a 10% gap. You saw a lot of new homes when it's only a 10% premium to buy a new over resale. Atlanta, as an example, was the #1 market in the country at 50,000 permits. And we were 40% of all demand. So what happened after 2002 is that 4% annual inflation went up at 15%. We were tracking it. It went up on the home price and the lot price. And we went, well, that's not normal. It's not sustainable. But unfortunately, it happened again in 03, 04, 05, 06, and 07. 15% inflation in home prices in this country, 03 to 07, 5 years in a row. Now, friends, that is a bubble. Why did that happen? Because if you had a 520 credit score, just got a San Quentin, and Kafagamira, we put you in a house, right? That's what fueled that. So we bottomed in 11, 4 years later almost, and these were the new metrics that we lived with. The price between new and resale had gone to 65% because of the collapse in resale prices because of foreclosures. 6,000 permits. Atlanta went from 60,000 to 6,000 permits. That's a 90% drop, and we're only 11%. So what's happened since 2011 to today? A decade-long, economists use the term reversion to the mean. What does that mean? Getting back to normal. It just took us a decade from bottoming in 11. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to give you Atlanta and Columbia. This happened in every city we track. It's amazing. This is 20 years in the making. So I go back to 12 at the bottom, and you got that massive gap between new prices and resale prices. This is the gap. It looks like a heartbeat because home prices on the resale side are very seasonal. New is not. You don't take your new home off the market in December. You take your resale off the market in December, right? That's that seasonality. But where are we now? For the first time in 20 years, we just got back to that 90% spread. That's resale is 90% of new home price, or 10% spread. That's the way to look at that. And that's the first time in 20 years. So did that happen in Columbia as well? Yes, it did. Almost the same chart. You bottomed at that massive gap right here back in 2013. And right now in Columbia and every other city that I track, you are back to an 8% spread between new and resale. First time in 20 years. That's incredible. That means we're back to normal. It also means we should be selling a heck of a lot of new homes at only an 8% premium, but we can't. Why? Talk about that. Let me give you another example. I don't have data for Columbia going back to 2002, but economists will go back to the most normal year and use it as a baseline. 2002 was the last normal year. Let's use it as a benchmark and project forward as if we didn't have a boom and collapse and see where we should be versus where we are. So the median new home price, boy, am I old. Can you believe that price, 167? Median resale price is 155. That's right here. Now, I'm going to forget that we had a boom and bust, and just on a spreadsheet, I'm going to appreciate both of those prices at 4.5% for 20 years. What I get to in 20 years is new should be at 387. You could do this on your own. Don't trust me. Where are we at today? New median price is actually at 389. Pretty close. Right where it should be. You with me? But now resales where we've seen the major increase in prices recently. On a spreadsheet, consider we were normal for 20 years. Resale should be at 345. We're at 346. What? Even with the massive bubble in the last year in resale prices, because they were so devastated during the subprime debacle with foreclosures at all. It's just taken us 20 years to get back to normal. And I've been saying this for a while. Article came out. So this is what happened. This is where we should have been if we were normal at a 20-year clip at 4.5% inflation. Here's what actually happened. Subprime bubble, we went way above the trend. We collapsed. We didn't find a bottom in 2011 and 12. So this is what actual prices did. This is what it should have done. It's taken us 10 years to finally get back there. Did you know that? Don't listen to me. The US government has this same data going back to 1975. You ready for that? If you take this chart, this works out, and we've done different countries that we're different. If you take 1975, annualize the rate of appreciation for all these other cities, including Australia, Canada, France, and the UK, it's 7.6, 7.4, 6.3, 5.7. If you look at Atlanta, the rest of just this country, what does he say right there? 4.6? Since 1975, we're on track to be on so you may go above the trend, you may collapse below it, but you're going to go back to it. Does that make sense? And we're there. We're going to see prices moderate because we don't have subprime baked into the system to cause crazy. Okay, yeah. Today, you actually have to have a job, not just state it. Right? You have to have a decent credit score and put skin in the game. That's a good backstop for us, and we're starting to see the effect of that. So let's look at Columbia's hardest markets. I want to brag on Columbia. I know everybody I go visit, and oh my gosh, prices are up. The cost to develop is crazy, It could be worse, folks. Can I tell you? So Robert Dietz has declared that 300 grand plus or minus is the new definition of entry level. 20 years ago, what was it? It was 150. So he says, and I agree with him, the markets that are going to grow are ones where builders can add product at or around that 300 price point. How you doing in Columbia? Let's look. I'm going to rank your high schools by new home sales and look at the prices. Boom, 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 boom. So these are the top 15 high schools by units closed. How many of your average prices in your top high schools fit the definition of Robert Dietz 300 plus or minus? How about all of them? Give yourself a round of applause. Now, is this getting easier or harder? Harder. I did tell you it could be worse. Let's look at Atlanta. Atlanta's top 15 high school districts. I'll go fast through this, but look at the average price. How many of those, not all of them, only about 8 of them fit that? You're going to continue to see those that are under it go up because the cost to develop a lot in Atlanta is twice what it is for you to develop a lot here in Columbia or in Augusta or in Greenville or in Savannah or in Huntsville or in Birmingham, it's 30 to 40 grand to put a lot on the ground, not including land, carry cost, and profit in all those cities. It is 70 grand to put a lot on the ground. And that is mainly because we have additional layers of government regulation that you don't have. So it's making it almost impossible for Atlanta to fit that entry buyer price point. And we're going to talk about that anyway. Hey, I can work from anywhere. I'm sick of Atlanta. I am, actually. 2-hour drive everywhere. Honey, let's go to the beach. We can work from anywhere. It's a pandemic. What can we afford at the beach? Just go to Myrtle Beach. Well, I'll be there at your state convention speaking on October 15th. I've never been there. Looking forward to it. So what can we afford at Myrtle Beach that puts us in that definition of 300 grand? Just about everybody. So you may be hard to see that, but these are the top subdivisions in Myrtle Beach: 299, 312, 301, 467 is anomaly, 360, 302, 266. Why am I in Atlanta? I got my bags packed. I'm going to Myrtle Beach tomorrow. This is, I'm telling you, I have been high on second tier markets for a long time. If you've heard me, it's a beating drum. I love markets like Columbia and Augusta and Greenville and Huntsville that are second tier cities around a big city like Atlanta, because I think quality of life matters. It does. And so does price point. And I'm telling you, the big cities are going to lose demand to the second tier cities. There's, by the way, this is how close you can get to the beach in Myrtle Beach and still be around 300 grand. Are you kidding me? I can go any direction in Atlanta. I'm 7 hours. Price points right there. And this came out yesterday. No, 2 days ago, September 7th. Robert Dietz, again, lots of capital shifting to smaller metros right now due to competitiveness, lack of deals and pricing issues in the larger metro. It's going, listen, I loved second tier cities before the pandemic. I love them even more now. And it's showing up in the data, folks. It is. The growth rates are doing great. We had a little glitch at the beginning. Can somebody tell me how I'm on time? I don't want to go over. I got a minute. Really, how am I doing? Okay, 10 minutes, so. Okay. I got to do this, especially for you here in Columbia. Is density dead because of the pandemic? No. Primary, secondary, and tertiary markets have seen density go up. Up. For 2 reasons. It mitigates price, and today's demographics demand it. Okay, we'll talk about that. Let's do cities around you. Right now, we've seen townhomes explode in Augusta, an hour and something to the west. Now 12% of all their sales are townhomes. In Savannah, we've seen it go up. It's now 10% of all townhomes. Charleston, way up. It's now 16% of all businesses a townhome. Don't tell me. So what's wrong? What's going on with Columbia? Well, Greenville, are you kidding me? Greenville's 18% townhome right now. What is that, an hour and a half away from here? Hour and a half? Okay. Well, we can't sell townhomes in Columbia. Don't tell me that. You got a couple that somebody accidentally let you zone, right? And they're doing very well. But the numbers are paltry. And it sounds to me like they're not going to let you do it again. Yes, you can. Only 3.7% of your sales are townhomes in Columbia. You need to build some more townhomes, folks. Yes, they will buy it. If you build it, you got to get pushed through the system. So why are townhomes, smaller square footage product in general, such an appeal today? Because the world's different. You've got the demographic group on the bottom, the big, behemoth millennials, the biggest group. And then you got the second biggest group, the boomers on top. That's the way the world looks today. The traditional single family school district buyer needs to be in a good school district with a big yard, a big house. They're now the smallest part. 20 years ago, that wasn't true. 20 years ago, these people on the top had kids. Okay? So they were the bulge in the middle. It was an inverted barbell. It made sense that our zoning played to their desires of needing a 4,000 square foot house in a good school district with a big backyard. Those days are gone, and our zoning's not keeping up with it. By the way, these two get along really well. This demographic group and this demographic group have an awful lot in common. 55, just kicked your last kid out of the house. Every night's a party. It is for them too. They don't need school district. They need fun. And they get along great. By the way, not every boomer wants to be put out to pasture in a Del Webb community with a bunch of other boomers that are 65 plus. Nothing against 65 plus. I'm approaching that quickly. Some of these guys want to be where the fun is. By the way, today's 55-year-old is different than it was a long time ago. This is an old slide. I got to update it. He looks pretty good for 55. Do you know how old he is now? He just finished 2 movies, Maverick and what's the other one? Anyway, he's 60. Tom Cruise is 60. Hangs from a cliff by his bare hands. So he's 50, he's 60. What did 50 look like? Well, there's Wilford Brimley, 1985. My point is, today's 60-year-old can run up and down stairs in a townhome and go party with the millennials. Build it, and they will come. So what happened to all the sub 22,000 square foot product in Columbia? What do you mean? It was there, and now it's gone. So these are some great subdivisions that offered that product. A couple of customers here. Thank y'all for being here. So all that stuff was sub 2,000 square feet. What happened to it? Well, this is the closings for last 12 months. Here's 2,000 square feet, just in case you can't see it. So let me show you the pending sales. That's what's coming. You ready? Here are the pending sales. That's pending. By the way, look at the increase in price from what closed in the last 12 months to the pending. This is new construction. But notice these red dots that are pending sales have nothing down here below 2,000 square feet. Can you see that? There's the new that used to be here below 2,000 square feet. Where did it go? It went away for a lot of reasons, probably. So where did that go? It's sub 2,000 square feet. You can see that lower price point. We're being pushed up by zoning practices, rising minimum square footages, rising minimum lot sizes. They're going the wrong way for today's demographics. Why are they doing that? They think they're maintaining prices, and they've been all talking to the same consultants who tell them, you can't pay for your services unless you sell a home at 300 grand plus. And that's a lie. Because most people who buy a home at 2,000 square feet don't have a kid who's going to crowd your schools. Did you know that? I do. So where is all that data? Those buyers are relegated now to buying resale because that's what's there at that square footage and price. I love resale. Does it create jobs? No. How many jobs does one house produce? 3 in this country. Every one house we build produces 3 jobs. Now, so let's talk about what you're up against, and then I'm going to quit. In terms of getting up in front of, and I do it every day with builders all over our footprint, city councilmen and women and commissioners. Well, we're not going to allow that square footage because it'll bring our values down, and I'm going to get blown up on Facebook by my constituents. So let's check that theory, shall we? So right now, we're being relegated and forced by current zoning and pricing issues as well to build up here. Now, that's a 325 house at 3,000 square feet. Can you see that? So what we were able to build, and let's follow the pending line and find 1,600 square feet. So if you were to sell this is the same regression line. So at 1,600 square feet, we would be at 210K, which is affordable. And what they think is it's going to lower our prices from 300 grand to 210. Is that how pricing works in the housing market? Who controls the gate for pricing. Appraisers. Is an appraiser going to compare this house in his 4 comps to this house? Heck no. By the way, which is more expensive, this one or this one? Well, what do you get for that $325? You're at $108 a square foot. What do you get for $210? You're at $131. Which house is more expensive? The 1,600 square foot one. And they don't get that. They're starting to get it because I'm telling them. By the way, the average resale in this 2,000 plus is only 13 years old. That's what we've been building for the last 20 years. That's tough to compete against at today's prices. We built those houses very well, and they're still in good shape. And they all had, all been redone because of everybody refining. What's the average age of all the resales below 2,000 square feet? 25. What do you want to compete with? A 13-year-old home or a 25-year-old home? What do we need to replace? The 13-year-old home? No. The older stock needs to be replaced. That is huge demand. It's not being met by new construction because they won't let us build it. They're gonna. So I'm gonna skip a lot and get to the end, and I appreciate your time. It's all positive. It's just a matter of, how we go forward in terms of, so let's get to Columbia. Columbia is the highest permits since 2006. This growth rate in permits, it just absolutely blows away Atlanta and any other major city. We're seeing that across the board. So we were down negative. And what did it take to bring us out of that funk? I don't know, a pandemic. Like a pandemic. Pandemic was a trigger for the millennials who've been a decade waiting while they sat in their little 1,000 square foot cave and grew up, paid off student debt, got a real good job, became married, became dinks, and now they're buying, and that's not going to stop. Here's my forecast. 3 reasons why the housing shortage will last for years. I've been saying a decade. For a year, I've been saying, we're a decade in this. People go, oh, he's speaking in hyperbole. He's exaggerating to make a point. No, I mean a real decade. Now people way smarter than me are backing me up on this. So Goldman Sachs says 3 reasons this is going to last for a very long time. They're going to look at demand side pressure on the market and supply side constraints. And I agree with all these. What they're saying is the millennials are just getting started, folks. We've just seen the tip of that iceberg. They're a massive demographic group. Some estimates say it's going to take 6 years for them to flow through the system buying homes. That is not going away. It's just getting started. It's here. The problem is, do they add to our inventory? No. What do you mean? They don't have a house to sell. They're coming out of their parents' basement, right? So they're sucking all the inventory out, biggest economic group. What should be happening is the boomers who raised their kids in that house should be selling. They're not. Why? Their kids are back with them. That's absolutely true. First of all, there's nowhere for them to go because there's no inventory and we're not building what they want. So what do? They all refied over the last year and a half. They took that money, they put a pool in, did an addition for Junior when he comes back, or maybe a parent. They're not letting go of those homes. We have a stalemate here, a massive drain on supply with no addition, and the boomers who have nowhere to go because we're not building it. It's a very sticky problem. So the supply side constraints, yes. Workers, lack of lots, lack of funding, blah, blah, blah. Price increases. Also, don't expect the end of forbearance to bring us any foreclosures that are going to amount to anything, right? If you get to the end of your job, if you get to the end of forbearance and you still don't have a job and you can't make your mortgage payment, you are not going to crawl into the bank with your keys on your hands and knees. Why? Are you underwater? Heck no. You're going to sell to the highest bidder, put a lot of money in your pocket, and you're going to go rent till you get a job. Forbearance is going to have zero effect on housing inventory. We need it. I wish it would. That's what they say. And how big is our problem? I'm going to skip and go straight to you guys. It's bad. It's bad everywhere. So let's go to you guys and we'll define this and we'll be done. And I appreciate your time. So Columbia is back to just below 1 month of supply. You've had a massive 60% increase in inventory from April to August. Did that help your deficit? The deficit is defined by what it would take to get us back to 6 months of supply, and you're now below 1. So the number of units it would take us to get back to 6 months of supply is 14,000 units. In Atlanta, it's 90,000 units. You can't overcome that anytime soon. And so you had a 60% increase. You had a 60% increase in inventory. What did it do to your deficit? It only dropped 3%. So if you want to see the deficit cut into of housing, you're going to have a lot more than a 60% increase in inventory. Is that going to happen anytime soon? No. We're going to be here for a long time. It's a better place to be than 2008 when we had all the supply in the world and no buyers. I'd rather be on this side. How about you? We're going to chip away as we can at that deficit. It's going to take us moving further out to find cheaper dirt. Some people will follow us. It's going to take us doing a higher density product and getting the city councils and county commissions convinced that they need to do that for their own constituency, because they're all millennials and boomers too. And those are the two ways we're going to fight this. And that's it, unless the government rolls back all their regulations that make our cost to build so high. Is that going to happen? No. So I thank you for your time. I've got some more slides. I'm going to send these out to everybody in a PDF form. And I certainly appreciate your time. And we're going to have question and answers after Rebecca speaks. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Sorry about that slide issue we had earlier. We're going back and forth between in-person and Zoom meetings, so still trying to figure it out. Our next speaker is Dr. Rebecca Gunlausen. Dr. Gunnlauggson is an economist specializing in statistical analysis and economic modeling of public finance and taxation policy issues. She is the president of Acutus Economics and formerly served as the director of the Division of Research and subsequently chief economist at the South Carolina Department of Commerce. She began her career with Accenture when she was involved in firm-wide business and technology implementations. She has done extensive research on public finance, taxation, and optimization for long-term economic growth, having testified before the 2009 Senate Finance Committee on Unemployment Insurance, the 2010 South Carolina Tax Realignment Commission, the 2017 South Carolina House Tax Policy Review Committee, the 2018 Senate Committee for Tax Review and Reform, and the 2020 Senate Education Funding Reform Study Committee. Additionally, she has served on the 2016 Governor's Local Government Comprehensiveness Council and currently serves on the South Carolina Retirement Systems Investment Commission Board. Dr. Gunnlausen received her bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering from Massachusetts Institute of Technology and her Ph.D. in economics from the University of Michigan. And also, if you guys remember from last year, I believe it was last year, because of the pandemic, everything's kind of fusing together, but she did a tax study for the city of Columbia that she'll discuss, that we had a webinar with the mayor, Steve Benjamin, and Councilman Daniel Rickerman that you guys may have remembered, and she'll kind of delve into that. So please welcome Dr. Rebecca Gunlausen.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that introduction, and I'm really excited to be here today. Oddly enough, it's a strange confession, but I really enjoy tax policy, and it just has such a great impact, or such a big impact on us and our state and our local regions. So to have the opportunity to share this study with you today is a great privilege. So before we begin, I want to give you a little background on the study. So coming out of the Great Recession, South Carolina experienced explosive growth in construction and capital deployment and jobs and income, far greater than the nation. The city of Columbia, however, witnessed slower growth than its other city counterparts throughout the state. We lagged in private GDP, firm growth, wages, employment, income, and population growth, particularly among the prime age population, which is those individuals that are 25 to 54 and really drive economic growth. So the question has been why? And one of the things that's emerged to the forefront has been a discussion about our high property tax rates, and that is deterring growth and depressing investment. And in fact, we'll see if the clicker works here. Apparently not. Well, there we go. Yes. So if you look at our property tax rates, indeed, we have higher rates than a lot of our peer cities. So what you're looking at right now is that property taxes include city taxes. That's the dark blue at the bottom. They include county taxes. That's the light blue. And then they include school taxes, which is the tan color. And on the left, you see Columbia. You see our Richland District 1 school district and our Richland District, if you live in that district, or if you live in the Richland 2, those are our property tax rates. And they are much higher than, they're 100, and the average is 112% higher than Charleston, 69% higher than Greenville. Then you see Lexington, Irmo, and West Columbia, and finally, and they're 43% higher than Rock Hill. And the problem particularly affects rentals. And I know in this audience, you actually are very well aware of the variation in property tax rates across different types of properties, but a lot of people don't know that. So one of the things that one of the charts I typically show, again, I'm guessing let's see, here we go. This is the tax on a $150,000 home in Columbia if you own it and live in it. And if you're 65 or older, you pay a little bit less because you get the homestead exemption. Now, if you turn around and rent that home, that's how much you pay in property taxes on it. So if I have to move, if I get transferred to Greenville and I buy a house there and I decide to rent my house out here, that's how much taxes I owe on it. And if I'm 65 or older, I don't get that tax break. I pay the exact same that I would if I was under 65. So the city of Columbia commissioned this study to examine property tax rates and their effect on property tax owners and economic growth and tax revenues. Now, the study itself is 81 pages, and it does a deep evaluation into a number of local and state property and tax data sets, but it really focuses on why are our tax rates so high? And for some time, or more recently, one of the driving explanations has been, it's because we have so much exempt property in the state, or in the city, that's owned by the government, or that's owned by nonprofits, or by the universities. And since we have so much exempt property, we have to have higher tax rates to make up for it. So we start off with that question: does Columbia have more exempt property? And the finding is a little bit, but not enough to drive such disparity in our tax rates. So if there's 45,000 plus parcels within the city limits of South Carolina, and of that, 7.8% are tax exempt. Now that compares to Greenville, which is 7.2% of their parcels are tax exempt, and Rock Hill, where we have 6.8%. And after the study was done, we actually got data from Spartanburg, where 9.5% of their parcels are tax exempt. Now, from an acreage standpoint, we also do have slightly more acreage that's exempt, 35% versus about 26% for each of those areas. And we did a lot of national comparisons as well, and Columbia was relatively on par with other cities throughout the nation. So again, while it is true that Columbia does have slightly more exempt parcels and acreage, ultimately, there's not that significant enough a gap for exempt properties to alone be the primary driving force of our high property tax rates. So we went through what might be all of the other causes that were driving our property tax rates. And there's really only 3 other possibilities. So the next one is maybe we rely on fewer revenues. Maybe we don't have a lot of revenues from other sources, so we overly rely on property tax, and that's what's driving the rates. And the answer to that is no, not really. And in fact, it's actually just quite the opposite. So here you see all of the city's revenues by source, and that bright blue pie piece is the revenues we receive from property taxes, and that's 19%. For comparison, the city of Charleston was 47%, Greenville was 53%, and Rock Hill was 36%. So in a manner of speaking, we're seeing that Columbia actually makes up for its lack of property tax revenues through other sources like various sales taxes or licenses or permits or fees. So another reason we might have higher property taxes is that we might spend more than other cities. If you spend more, you need to have higher taxes in order to support that spending. So the answer here generally points to yes, but it's complicated. It's in layers. If you remember that first chart that had our tax rates, and we had city and county and school entities, you really have to break it down by that taxing entities. So if we take a look at school revenues, this is the revenues per pupil that each of these school districts raise. And you will see 3 of them, well, 3 of them are within the, I guess, overlap with city limits. We have Richland 1, Richland 2, and Lexington 5. And so Richland 1 is all the way on the left. And they're all generally higher than the peers, and they're higher than the state average, which is right there, 3rd from the right. In fact, and the dark blue, that's the amount of revenue that they raise directly from property tax. So all of these are generally higher than their peers and the state average. And correspondingly, they have higher tax rates to go along with it. Now, we can also look at city and county revenues, and we can see that Richland County and City of Columbia, that pair generally also raises higher revenues per capita than the other city and county pairs, except for Charleston and Charleston County. And here it's very important that we combine those entities together, because throughout the state, we have these unique relationships between cities and counties where in one area, a city provides this service, but in another area, the county provides that same service. And yet in another area, a special purpose district provides that service. So we really have to combine all of those together and look at them combined to get any sort of apples to apples comparison. Okay, so then there's one 4th possibility, and it's not that, and it may not just be one possibility. We have a combination of factors that are driving our high property tax rates. But the last possible factor is that we might have lower property valuations. Because if our property is less valuable, then we need a higher tax rate in order to generate the same amount of tax revenues as other cities. And here the finding is truly a resounding yes. So if we look at, this is the total assessed value per capita in Richland County versus these peer counties, Charleston, Greenville, Lexington, and York. And we do have less valuable property than elsewhere. Now, sometimes people will point to this and say, well, this proves that we have more exempt property, because otherwise we'd have higher taxable property per person. But in that case, first of all of these other counties would have higher as well, but it also ignores the fact that even our individual properties are less valuable per unit. So if we actually look at the assessed value per unit, Richland County is generally lower, and it's not just real property, it's personal property as well, and that's automobiles, boats, airplanes. We generally have a lower value per unit than these others. But the real compounding issue here is that we have had exceptionally slow growth. Between the tax year 2010 and 2018, all the value in Richland County only grew 3.4% versus 8% for York County, 11% for Greenville and Lexington, and almost 20% for Charleston. And this is very important, and it's particularly important because there's two sort of hidden underlying trends behind this. Now, the first involves growth across school systems. Now, we have a situation in Columbia where we have many families who live in Richland School District 2, but they work in Richland School District 1. And in fact, we see that in the student population of those two school districts. With Richland 1, we've actually, since 2010, seen a decline in pupils, down 4%. And in Richland District 2, we've actually seen an increase, a huge increase in pupils, up 15%. And this is just since 2010, but it's been going on at least since 2001, as far back as the data set I have. Now, corresponding with that is the way we see growth in properties as well. So in Richland District 1, we actually see, so you see a decline of 4% in owner-occupied units since 2010. At the same time, we see an increase, as these of you that are converted to commercial or to rental properties, we see an increase in commercial and rental properties since 2010 also. And here's where the really interesting thing about tax policy comes into place. And it's actually kind of negative, it's a negative factor in this case, but it's still very interesting. So I know all of you are familiar with Act 388 from 2006. And what Act 388 did was it removed school operations taxes out of owner-occupied homes. So you can see in Richland District 1, where we have all this decline in owner-occupied housing, is not affecting the tax base whatsoever. The schools are still, they're not seeing a loss in tax revenue for operating because of the loss in owner-occupied housing. However, the increase in commercial and rental is providing extra revenue to the school district, despite the fact that they are losing pupils. And the exact opposite is happening in Richland District 2, where we see a huge growth in owner-occupied housing, which is fueling a huge growth in pupils, but providing no new tax revenue for school operations to the schools. Meanwhile, also seeing a decline in commercial and rental properties as they convert to owner-occupied or cease to grow, and that's actually taking school district revenues for operations away from the school, despite the fact that, again, they're gaining pupils. And what it does, it further drives increases on taxes on the remaining properties. So essentially, we have this economic and demographic dynamics going on in Richland County, which are actually working against each other when it comes to school finance. Now, the other second underlying trend also has to do with 388, but it has to do with property valuations. So this is the average value, going back to 2010, of a commercial property in Richland County, that's in the tan color, and an owner-occupied property, which is in the blue color. And so you see they gradually get larger until we get to 2014. And then there's a huge drop in the appraised value or the taxable value, and then it starts to inch back up. So what happened here is we really had this perfect storm of very unfortunate factors that was combined with poor state policy. So Richland County had their 5-year state mandated reassessment come along in 2014. And it occurred at a time when all the home prices were very depressed. And it particularly hit Richland County because you don't see this in the other counties because their state mandated reassessment, reappraisal came a year later. And 2, Columbia lagged many of these other areas in terms of rebound from the Great Depression, the price drop from the Great Depression. And then finally, Act 388 limits property valuation for tax purposes to 15% every 5 years, unless the property is sold. So 2014 comes along, the values are depressed, and it really locks in those depressed values. And due to that 15% increase limitation, the decline can never be fully made up once the market rebound did arrive. So those lower taxable values are now baked in. And it creates a lot of inequality between owners of the same type of property, someone who's lived, neighbors who live in essentially the same house, but one's lived there for 20 years, versus one who just moved in. And this will just get worse as time goes on. So ultimately, the area finds itself in this sort of continuous feedback loop where we have high taxes, and that leads to slower growth and poor property valuations. And that tends to lead to lower tax revenues, and which prompts leaders to increase tax rates, which lead to further depressed valuations and slow growth. And it goes on and on. And I want to show you how that's played out over the past 10 years. So if you think about it, if you're an entity like the city, and you, the way you get tax revenues, this really comes from three ways you can increase tax revenues. One, you can have an increase in the actual number of units. So we have construction, we build new homes, we build new businesses, we increase the tax base, and that brings in new revenues. Another thing we can do is we can actually see an increase in the average value. So property becomes more valuable, and we bring in more tax revenues. And then the third thing that the entity can do is actually just flat out raise the tax rate. So we did a component analysis and looked at the effect of each of those. And so this is for commercial properties only. And Richland County is the one second from the right, it's highlighted. And this shows all the new tax revenues that have come in over this, the 10 years. In brown is the amount that's come in from new unit growth. And for commercial properties, Richland County was pretty much flat. Green shows the new tax revenues that have come in due to an increase in the valuation of properties. That's about 32% for Richland County. And then finally, the top, the tan, is the amount that's come in from just tax rate increases, which is 67.7%. So you can see that us versus all of our peer counties, we have not seen that growth in units and valuation like the other counties have. And instead, we have seen higher and higher tax rate increases bringing in our revenues. Now, if we see this, look at the same thing just for owner-occupied housing, we can see that new units brought in 12.5% of new tax revenues. The valuation actually took away 5% of our tax revenues. And then which 92.5% of all tax revenues from owner-occupied housing came from tax rate increases. So I know this seems kind of depressing, but what can we do to lay the groundwork for the future? And not just temporary spurts of growth that fade away, but how do we have growth that is self-sustaining? And there's an outline of 4 steps that we can take and do this. And it's not really, pick one or 4 options. They really are all part of the same plan. And first and foremost, we really need to make our commercial property tax rates competitive. Otherwise, we will keep losing investment or prevent it from happening in the first place. The high tax rates, particularly among commercial properties, are causing a crisis of disinvestment, which we see in our area's declining population. We see it in slow income and job growth, and we see it in depressed asset valuation. So here's what would require to be competitive. So for a property in a Richland District 1 would require a 49% to be on reduction to be on par with Charleston. And I'm not necessarily advocating that. Charleston's a very unique market with very high valued real estate. So I don't think we need to match them on the tax rates, but that is what would be required just for information. Now, Greenville, which we might be more on par with, it requires 35% reduction, and Rock Hill, which is coming up here in a second, should be a 24%. There we go, 24% reduction for Rock Hill. But most importantly, whatever is implemented requires a coordinated effort between the city and county and school districts to target a competitive rate, to put in a phase-in period and how it's structured and the rate of reduction during the phase-in period, and to jointly target some limitation on spending or look for cost savings during that phase-in period. And here's why it's so important. So here's what we've been doing to mitigate our very high tax rates for some time. We have been giving large selective tax breaks to a handful of developers, hoping that that will encourage follow-on growth and create local jobs and income. And honestly, it is not just us. Our state tax code is so skewed away from industry that it really encourages all localities to do the same type of thing. So for example, we've recently used several special source revenue credits to give a few developers a large, tax rates that equate to exactly 50%. Now, clearly, the actual tax rate that they faced prior to the tax break was onerous enough that they weren't willing to develop here. But here's the problem with addressing sort of the larger problems of the area's larger tax problems with single one-off tax breaks. First of all, the 56% tax rate actually makes it more discounted than any of our peers. So it's really more discounted than, say, competitively necessary. And most businesses don't qualify for the tax rate. So it drives this unequal treatment of businesses and citizens. And it has not just short-term implications, but long-term implications of depressing growth among startups, particularly smaller and local businesses. Job and income creation is not necessarily guaranteed as well. With manufacturing or high tech, those typically bring in a lot of high-paying jobs to local citizens. When you're talking about, say, retail or student housing, those don't necessarily bring in that same level of jobs and high-paying jobs. And finally, it's unlikely that this is going to spur as much development or follow-on development because every new entrant is going to still face that high tax hurdle that prevented their larger counterpart from developing in the first place. So the second part of this is that we really need to coordinate our school system finances. Again, we have economic and demographic dynamics that are working against each other when it comes to school system finance. And in Richland 1, we have declining pupils, we had declining owner-occupied housing, increasing commercial, and the fourth highest revenues per pupil in the state. Meanwhile, in Richland District 2, increasing pupils, increasing owner-occupied housing, declining commercial units, and the highest school millage rate in the state. So if we don't identify a cooperative financial approach of some sort, we are going to see just a continued acceleration of these trends, which is going to worsen the tax environment for both the schools and the taxable properties that are within there. The third step is to identify and implement competitive efficiencies. So the depressed revenues from property taxes for the city and the county have really made them more reliant on other fees and taxes. And many of these are already higher than many of our peers, which increases the cost of doing business and it continues to depress investment more. So given the limited capacity that we have to raise more revenues from these other sources, we need instead to look for cost-saving measures. One possibility is to conduct a city and county efficiency study where we could identify opportunities to merge overlapping services and make those services less expensive. And finally, another option might be to, and I'm passing. Got impatient. Okay, so that is to create, look at remodeling our permitting, our zoning, our licensing processes with urban development best practices in mind that encourage growth. And then finally, the last step is to actively petition the General Assembly. And some people think I mean this as a joke, but truly we do, Act 388, it is not the driving force behind our local problems with high tax rates, but it facilitates it and it will intensify over time, both on property valuations and on school system growth patterns. Now, among options, we can start with the most unlikely, which is the full repeal of Act 388. While that would equalize school tax burden across properties, that's not something that's going to happen. But a more realistic option might be taking smaller bites. For example, just a repeal of the 15% valuation limit. And if that's not the case, then perhaps just petitioning the legislature for a one-time waiver to accurately reappraise all properties and apply the resulting tax revenues to a generalized lower tax rate. So it would be resultant net revenue neutral. And this is really important because, again, as of 2019, almost 32% of the properties within the city of Columbia had a taxable value that was less than the fair market value. And that amounted to almost over $500 million worth of a tax gap between taxable and fair market value. And this will just continue to get worse over time. So I know all of these policies and all of these options seem like a heavy lift, but they really are all doable. Crafting a policy and a phase-in period using data-driven solutions actually is the easy part. The hard part is the coordination and collaboration that would be required between city and county and school district officials in order to put in a solution that promotes sustained economic growth for the region for the future. So that's the study in a nutshell. I know it was a large nutshell, but I appreciate you having me here, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
And I think there's mic. And if anybody has any questions, there's a mic right on the floor if y'all want to go up and ask any questions to our panel. Don't everybody run at once. Okay, here's one.
Hey, good afternoon. I was wondering how collectively as a group can we encourage the local municipalities as far as zoning ordinance and everything else to increase that density, whether that's in one-on-one conversations or group settings? And what are you doing? You said you've been speaking with them. How have you been going about that, and how can we assist with that?
It's a good question, and it's not easy, and it's going to take a while, but we're seeing progress. And I think it's a matter of time. The demographics of this country are going to drive that, period. I keep telling, I've got 2 millennials and 2 Gen Zs, and those are the 2 groups that brought the retail industry to its knees in this country. Now they're in the home buying process. They will not leave it unchanged at all. And they desire this higher density, walkability, all those kinds of things that are kind of antithetical to what we're allowing to be zoned. Charleston is a very great example. We were involved in March at their comprehensive planning summit. In April, they completely turned their zoning upside down, not just Charleston proper, but all of the surrounding cities and mayors, allowing for what we call missing middle, which is a variety or a mix of densities, including not just townhomes. There's a whole host of product between a townhome and an apartment that we haven't built in 80 years because it's illegal. And that's on purpose in some cases. But we're talking about duplexes and quads and mansion apartments and courtyard homes. And that missing middle terminology is all in Charleston's comprehensive plan, getting rid of minimum parking requirements, allowing ADUs. It just happened in Charlotte. They did it about a month ago, and I didn't know. I wasn't involved in that one. And if you read their change in comprehensive plan, it's all missing middle. It's all about allowing a diversity of product in the same location. Places that were once only zoned for single family, now you can do anything as well as single family in the same location. And that's what we've been afraid to do, or not allowed to do for such a long time. It's happening slowly but surely. And it's going to continue to happen, in my opinion. I think demographics are going to drive it, but education is huge. Showing them slides, I go, this is not going to decrease your housing values, even though you think it is. You know, and I'm ready. I'm ready. Invite me.
Hi, Dr. Rebecca, since you're local, I have a question for you. It's funny that we're talking today about county council, different areas and everything. How could we encourage our counties, like planning and zoning, like Richland County, Kershaw County, those, and Sumter counties, the different counties around us, to go in and do some rezoning in certain areas to bring down, like in the rural areas, they have a certain zoning codes in the rural areas compared to the city areas. And then also with the density of everything, they have gone in and did these other different zonings where if you own a large parcel of land, if you want to do a smaller development, it's kind of not encouraged because they're putting higher restrictions on them, and most people are more land poor. They're more cash poor, but land rich. So some of the things that you're talking about, how can you get the counties just to step up, come back to the communities and ask the communities what they want, and then come back and change those things?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? So, yeah, so no, I mean, that is the question. How do you get counties to coordinate? And, you know, I think you're a little bit out of my wheelhouse with specifics on, you know, density, which you definitely are there. But I think from a city of Columbia standpoint, and, you know, a Richland County standpoint, just, you know, when we talk about, you know, developing efficiencies and coordination between the city and the county, and particularly the focus on commercial properties, one of the things that, you know, I hear when I go throughout the state is, you know, developers who have developed in our city is how different it is and how onerous it is and how hard it is. And so ultimately, you know, if we want to be the city that attracts investment and particularly commercial investment, we need to have our policies and our zoning set up to do that. We have to have our offices set up to work with builders and work with developers to make the process easy for them and quick for them.
Do you have any other questions? Okay.
John, I'm gonna throw you a softball because I think I know the answer to this. I'd like to get your official.
Thank you, Alan, for the softball.
So Lexington County, which is one of our biggest markets, is looking at some measures that dramatically decrease density. They're talking about, you know, 50% open space in the overlay district, you know, increasing open space, other areas, lessening density across the board. Tell me what happens when you put lines.
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is that the prices go up dramatically and your, you know, the closings drop dramatically, which may indeed be their purpose, to get right down to it. If they're trying to slow growth, that's why they're doing it. Again, I think it's short-sighted. I think it's based on inaccurate information. It's based on an absolute misunderstanding of who your own electorate is. It's the two big demographic groups we talked about, who want that smaller square footage in a tighter space because they've lived for 20 years, 30 years raising their kids in what we zoned 20 years ago. Now we're going back to that and making it even worse for whatever reason to maintain proper roads. Again, it's based on whoever blows you up on Facebook. And it's not just the city council and county commissioners, it's the local constituents that don't get it to a large degree. So it's absolutely going to cut down on the number of homes being built, new construction, which is a massive part of our economy. And again, I just think it doesn't reflect who their own constituents are. The ones that are not blowing up on Facebook are the ones that don't come here because we can't build what they want. There you go.
And if there are no further questions, I just want to say thank you for bearing with us on our technical difficulties for today. It's a Thursday, right? Thank you to our speakers, to our sponsors for joining us virtually and in person. I also want to thank our partners, BIA and the Columbia Chamber and their presidents. And with that, we will wrap up for today, and hopefully that we will see you next year, and everyone stay safe. Have a good day.